Hey there, Chris here. Just wanted to talk about headroom because there's always a lot of discussion about how much headroom a mastering engineer needs or how much headroom I should leave in my mix before mastering. And the answer to that is, well, first of all, the the conventional wisdom is that you need 6 decibels of headroom, so that the peak value should be -6. Now, that's not bad advice, but it's often taken too literally because technically speaking, in this day and age, in digital and stuff like that, the amount of headroom that the mastering engineer needs is 0. They only really need it for not to be clipping. So as long as you're not clipping, you're fine. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen people take it too literally to the extent where they'll put compressors or limiters on the mix bus to create this golden 6 dB of headroom, because they believe that the mastering engineer needs that, and it completely defeats the point because they're actually reducing the dynamics just in pursuit of this -6 number, which completely defeats the point. Because the mastering engineer, as long as the dynamics are healthy, they can create the peak headroom that they need. The very first thing that's on my mastering chain is always a gain plugin. If I turn it down, I create headroom whilst leaving the dynamic of the material as it was. Or I can turn it up if I want to, obviously. So there's no significance to the value of -6. Okay, what you actually need is to give yourself headroom when you're mixing for your own benefit and for the benefit of the plugins that you're using, especially if they're analog modeling plugins or they're compressors and stuff like that, because the way they behave is relative to how loud the signal going into them is. So you should be doing that anyway. You should be practicing gain staging. I'll leave my gain staging video down here and an article about that. You should be doing that anyway, but there's no significance to the value of -6 because in terms of peak headroom, the mastering engineer can do what they need to do to create that peak headroom. So yeah, I mean, it's as simple as that. Like having 6 dB of headroom doesn't necessarily make my life any easier as a mastering engineer, but it should. But knowing that and thinking about levels and thinking about headroom in the mix process, that's something that you should be doing as mixers, as producers, because it'll make your life easier and you'll probably come out with healthier sounding, more dynamic mixes. And when it comes to mastering, they'll attain like the right loudness and the right dynamics and stuff like that. In mixing, you shouldn't really be thinking about what the end loudness, the absolute loudness is going to be. You should be focusing on the goal of mixing, which is balance. Practice gain staging. Don't record too hot. Record, healthy green signals as per the meters on your door, and you'll always have headroom. And calibrate your monitoring as well. I've got some content about that in the description as well. Because if you calibrate your monitoring, you're physically by the way you set the loudness of your monitoring, you're forced to give yourself headroom. And I explain more about that in the content linked below. But just to summarize, there's no significance to the value of -6. You just need to make sure that you've got healthy dynamics and that you're not clipping. Now, if you do have a really hot signal on your master bus when you're mixing and it is clipping, just load a gain stage or a trim utility or whatever and just turn it down. Because if you turn it down that way, it will retain the dynamics just to bring that peak value down and then print it out and send it off to a mastering engineer. Otherwise, you can actually print it out as 32-bit float if you're unsure, because even if it is clipping, it will give itself the headroom in order for that not to be baked in to the audio that you send to the mastering engineer. But please, I'm happy to answer any questions. Just leave them in the comments and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible as I can, because I know this stuff is a bit confusing. So, I'm more than happy to help you and guide you into making better mixes so that you can ultimately get better masters, whether you're mastering it yourself or you're using a mastering engineer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.